So you're joined by the legendary cinematographer, Sam Cronin. He's got many a feature under his belt.
You know I'm using that now, right? Future Alex here. Just a quick note to say that this video was actually recorded almost 2 years ago. So, well, as you can see from behind me, a lot has changed in that time. And with that in mind, on with the show. I'm joined today by a good friend of mine, Sam. He's been unfortunate enough to have known me for the best part of 10 years now, I think. It's coming up, it's 10 years, isn't it, this year?
Yeah, like you say, unfortunately, yeah. Coming on 10 years.
In that time, I mean, we've worked together on a lot of stuff. We're both cinematographers. We've done a lot of short films together, whether that be opping for each other or just sharing DP duties. But I think one of the things we've got in common is our love for Zeiss Contax lenses.
Well, I think you're to blame on that one. I think you're the one that got me into it, and it's a big money pit that is the contact lenses.
Do you know, you laugh, I had an email this morning saying, someone who just found my website and said, oh, you've got me going down the rabbit hole on vintage lenses. So I just had to reply back and just say, it's a deep, deep hole.
Yeah, welcome to the club. I think I was quite hesitant to start with. I think I started with the 50, and I think from there I was just straight away when I used it I was like, all right, here we go. This is kind of what my lenses have been missing. And then I think I saw the more lenses that you got, the more that I saw, and the more I was like, oh god, yeah, not gonna build to just buy one. Gonna have to buy them all now. Slowly making my way through them.
Like you, up until that point, I was shooting on like Canon glass, DSLR lenses, and like you, the 50mm was the first one I got of the Zeiss Contax range, and you can immediately see the difference just on the back of a 5D screen. You know, clients were looking at that and just saying, wow, look at that. Like even they could tell the difference. And
it's also just well made as well, like well built, like good to use, and it's like obviously the visuals, the optics are amazing, but it's actually just fun to use as well. It feels like a really decent lens, and it's kind of the same price. It's the same price, exactly. Yeah, and it's the same price, if not cheaper than a lot of 50mm, where you wouldn't get that kind of quality in that price range. I think that's what just makes it. That's the thing that stood out. I think first, when I first got the lens, I was like, this doesn't feel like the amount that I paid for it. It doesn't feel like it should be like this. If that makes any sense. I think
we caught on just at the right time before vintage lenses like exploded. We kind of got onto it. I mean, I heard recently someone can't even find any 50mm on eBay, the Contax 50mm. Yeah, I mean, I don't know how true that is because there's so many of them, but yeah, they're dirt cheap. And you're right, compared to like the plastic DSLR lenses, you're like, this is what a lens should be.
The lens I had before this lens was the Canon 1.4, not the nifty 50.
The Plastic Fantastic.
Plastic Fantastic. Yeah, it was the Canon 1.4, and when I got the Zeiss, it just felt like a massive leap, like a huge leap in quality, even though it wasn't even much different in price.
I mean, that kind of sort of sums up the Zeiss Contax. We both started with the 50mm and said, I can't have just one.
I think the 50's always a gateway drug into these sort of things. It's a new set of lenses, so it's always a 50.
I think the 28mm was the next lens I got. Early on, I decided that I was going to get the so-called super speed set. A lot of the Contax range obviously come with both sort of 1.4 or f2 variants and then slower f2.8 versions of the same focal lengths. Not for all, but for most of them. And there is a 28mm f2.8, but I decided to get the 28 f2. I figured if I'm going to build a proper set of lenses, I should get the fast ones. Just you know that they're the best you can get. I mean, optically, you know, the standard speeds are just as good. It's simply that the super speeds open up wider, so you get that extra 1 or 2 stops. So, and it's also about 5 times the price for a whole set.
Yeah, didn't you consider getting like both the sets, like the ones you got now, and then also?
Certainly, a couple of years ago, you could pick up a whole set of standard speeds for probably about £1,000. And yeah, I toyed with the idea of getting a whole set of them. You could use it as like a gimbal set, because they're all very small and light, and they're all about the same size. But also, I toyed with the idea of like decoating them all. You could have like a set of uncoated vintage lenses for some really wild character, but I haven't. I've spent too much money on this set, you know, to
make you question everything. If you add up the complete number of how much you spent on lenses.
Oh God! I mean, I know how much I spent on just this
the
set.
amount of the car I could have bought, the
deposit for a house.
Yeah.
I think that's the trouble with lenses, and particularly, I know that this 28mm actually. I got a paycheck from a job, and I immediately spent the whole lot on this lens, like that very day. I saw it come up on eBay, it was a good price, and I thought, oh, I've just been paid, you know, and I was, my mouth slipped.
Yeah, again, I blame you for that one. I mean, you sent me the eBay link of the one I bought.
Did I?
Oh, this one's looking pretty good, and I was like, oh, here we go.
Was the 28 your next one as well?
Yeah. To be fair, that was probably the most easiest lens purchase I've done, because I got the 50. Was like straight away I was like, this is next level. And then I think I saw that he was using the 28 a lot, and I think I actually used it quite a bit from your collection. And I was like, all right, this is the one, the 28. This is definitely the one I'm getting next. It looks like the perfect like 2-shot lens. It was like for 2 people in a frame, it was like the easiest lens to use and just the perfect choice.
Well, I think what's actually quite useful with the 28mm focal length is it's a really good focal length on both full frame and Super 35. So regardless of what camera you're shooting with, it's a useful lens to have. Like on full frame, it's a nice wide angle, but I think 28 is that sweet spot before it gets too wide and starts stretching faces and people at the edges.
Exactly, yeah. I think I always use that lens, like I said before, as a 2-shot, and it's just like it's just the perfect choice for a 2-shot. It just even on full frame, I think.
Yeah.
I think it's like it's perfect for that kind of kind of frame you're after.
And then on Super 35, that's 28 is sort of like your standard lens.
I think it's a very adaptable lens. I think the 50 is great, but especially on a Super 35, you are kind of restricted to that focal length. It is quite tight.
The 35mm was the last lens I got in my set to fill that gap between 28 and 50. And so I must have had that 28 for 5 years or something, and I didn't have a 35. So yeah, I was using that 28 for quite some time. I only had the 28 and the 50, you know, and those were like the only 2 lenses I'd need.
I think you can get away with quite a bit with a 28mm. I think if you need to do a punch-in, I think you can use it. If you want to shoot some sort of wide, I think you can use it.
Well, what's useful with this particular one is it's got a really good close focus on it. So you can do close-ups and single shots.
You can get quite close. I don't know the exact kind of minimum focus range, but I think if you did want to come in for a close-up, or if you did want to do some sort of tighter frame, it's just the most adaptable lens I think I've got.
What is it about the image that you think is so good? We've said that obviously it's got fantastic mechanics. You know, they don't build lenses like they used to, just metal and glass. And we said about the focal length itself, but why this lens over any other 28mm, or even the standard speed 28 Contax?
The f2 stood out, because I think even when you pull it right down to f2, usually a lot of lenses just kind of crumble. and they're not really usable at f2 or whatever f-stop they are. But I think this is one of the few lenses I've used where even when I put it down to say f2, it still is completely like usable, perfect frame.
Well, it's been given the moniker Hollywood, right? You must have heard of that.
Definitely didn't buy it. Definitely didn't buy it because it was called that. And straight away that caught my attention. I was like, right, why is it called Hollywood? Must be a reason. I'm sure you know.
I'm not sure. I don't think I've ever found a definitive reason why. I've heard lots of theories. One, that it was adapted into Hollywood lenses, into cinema lenses. But to be honest, I haven't found any evidence for that. I just think it's got that secret sauce. It just looks so good, and I think that's all it comes down to.
Compared it to like a standard prime lens, say the Canon prime lens, the 28mm, it's kind of day and night when you put them side by side. And considering the price range, it's definitely not bad.
Well, the price range, that's only going up these days, isn't it?
Well, yeah.
Particularly for this one.
Would you say this is probably the most popular of the old Contax?
I'd say it's probably the one with the most cult-like status. In terms of popularity, perhaps most sought after, that along with the 21 probably. But it's certainly not the most common. It's definitely rarer than a lot of the others. In terms of pure numbers, I would guess the 50 is the most common.
What kind of stood out with Contax? What kind of brought you on to the Contax train?
The Contax hype train. The money train,
yeah. The hype.
The money pit. About 5 or 6 years ago, I was looking for a set of full-frame primes that I could adapt to cine use. And I had a short list of requirements that I needed. So I wanted, they needed to cover full frame. I wanted a manual aperture ring. I wanted hard stops, the focus ring to go the correct direction. And optically, they had to be good. And really, the Contax was, after many a Googling, many a night researching, the Contax was really the only brand, or it was the only lens that stood out. It's the only set of lenses that fulfilled all those requirements. There was one or two other brands that ticked most of the boxes, but either the focus ring was the wrong way around, or I didn't think optically they were any good.
Yeah, I was gonna say, like, which other kind of who was it like neck and neck with another kind of set of lenses ever?
I wouldn't say it was neck and neck. Like I say, there's Samyang, which were all manual, full frame, manual aperture, all that kind of stuff, EF mount. But I wasn't a fan of the image. And then there's Leica R, which is the other popular vintage lens to remount to EF and modify for cine use these days, but they're a lot more expensive than Zeiss Contax. These days there's loads of choice. If you want full frame primes that got manual aperture rings and all that kind of stuff, there's loads of choice. But at the time, going the vintage route was really the only way. Back when they actually had aperture rings on the lenses.
I gotta admit, I love how easily these lenses can be modded. Like the declicking, adding the gears and stuff like that is, for a lens as cheap as they are, that is pretty crazy.
The first thing everyone does to them is remount them to EF, right? So there's a guy in Spain called David, the brand Litax. You can get all the adapters from him. You can fit them yourself.
Come on, autofocus. Come on, need the branding. There we go.
I think your lens is in better condition than mine. I've hacked bits off the back of the mount. I've taken the lenses apart and hacked levers and all sorts, just to make them as compatible as possible with speed boosters and things like that. This lens actually is probably worth saying, of all the Contax lenses, this is one of the ones that on a full frame DSLR, when you flip the mirror up to go into live view, it'll hit the back element. You can just see the element.
Yeah, I think the back of mine's not in terrible nick actually. Looks quite good.
Mine's like I've cut bits out. Sometimes when you're using it with speed boosters or metabones, stuff like that, you don't want the contacts touching. Some adapters, it just like hangs the camera. So I remounted it. We've had them declicked, so it got a nice smooth aperture. Only when I finished the set did I decide, well, I always planned on, but only when I finished the set did I get gears and front rings.
Yeah, nothing like this.
You got a nice naked lens.
Yep.
Optically they're superb, but I couldn't use them on any professional sets because they didn't have gears for a follow focus, things like that.
It doesn't look badass.
But once I finished them, get some gears on them, and I've used them on loads of jobs.
They stand out as well. Like, they look cool. Can't deny that. They got the cool factor as well.
We've got custom
especially
caps.
Especially the custom caps. A lot of like old primes. How much do you reckon you could mod? Say, like the Helios and stuff like that. How much compared to these? How much?
You watched the last video.
Totally, all the way through. Yeah, I may have missed that part.
That part. Like the whole video.
Yeah, I was just gonna say like how easily are these modded compared to say that.
These aren't as modded. Just well, you can do all of this with a Helios. You know, you can put front rings, gears, and a different mount on it, whether it be an EF or a PL or whatever. But you can rehouse them. That's the next step. You can rehouse Contax. They're not cheap. Some places will only do these standard speed versions, just because it's very difficult to put a PR mount on some of the around the rear elements and some of the faster primes. Some places are doing them, but like I say, for the cost of one lens to rehouse, you could buy just 3 of them. So you got to really, really love them to get them rehoused. I mean, I love them, but that's probably as far as I'd take it. To buy a whole set and then rehouse them would be the cost of just buying a whole set of Cine lenses to begin with. It kind of defeats the purpose of getting Contax. Is these were superb lenses at a fraction of the cost of a Cine lens, and you can still mod them to, you know, cinefy them.
I think that's the big draw into the lenses, though, isn't it? It's like how much quality you get for how cheap.
Yeah, I mean that's the appeal with vintage lenses, isn't it? Is that they are easier to mod. They're all metal. They've got hard stops. They've all got manual aperture rings. You know, as long as you can put an EF mount on them or whatever mount you need, you know, you're good to go. And assuming optically they're good, I mean, loads of old lenses, loads of model lenses as well. Loads of lenses are trash optically, but if you pick a good lens, it's all, you know. Yeah, this lens is older than me. This is, you know, probably 40 years old, but it's just as good optically then as it was now. You know, a lens will never get worse. Well, it could, with fungus and all that, but in theory, a lens will never get, like cameras get outdated, lenses don't.
Actually, yeah, that's a good question. Then how future-proof do you think these lenses are?
As long as people are still using EF mount, I can see myself using these for years.
They're pretty older than us, and yet they're still very, very usable, and I can imagine they probably will be for years to come.
Yeah, I mean the only trouble is they're getting harder to find. The cat's out of the bag. Everyone's onto Contax lenses now. Everyone's buying them up. The prices are going up, so they are definitely harder to find now than they were when we started collecting them.
Well, yeah, the Hollywood. I think that if you really probably desperately needed the Hollywood now, I wonder how hard it'd be to find compared to, say, when we were looking.
Yeah, I mean, Japan still has most of the focal lengths, but you'll be paying a premium for them. In terms of like just general auctions or availability in Europe, you know, they don't come up on eBay very often.
Yeah, I think they are getting quite rare.
Lenses are investments, so even with like remounting it to EF, because in a way that restricts, I mean, they are reversible. Mine aren't. I've done too much to them. So these are, I've taken bits apart and
with love.
Cut things up. But even with EF, which restricts the audience or the potential customer base somewhat, I think they'll easily, if I were to ever sell them, they'll easily fetch what I paid for them.
That's interesting. So you think they'll the word investment probably is probably accurate.
Yeah.
In the sense that if you do one day come around to selling them, it's not something that deteriorates.
No.
I can imagine.
Well, yeah, because like they're only going to get harder to find, so their value does go up.
Well, because end of the day, they are just metal and glass. Like
But this one's got unicorn dust in it. I mean, well, in terms of the actual look, this one stands out from the rest of the Contax line, both by reputation and image. It's not that it doesn't match the others, but it has that extra secret sauce, doesn't it? What are the ingredients in secret sauce?
What are the ingredients for a secret sauce? It's hard to describe because it's like the best way I can describe the look and what stands out about it is it just has character, and it's hard to pinpoint just what that is because it's just different in a very subtle way. But something you just take one little glance at, and straight away you can tell there's something different and good about it. Like really, really solid, and it's not your typical like clean image. There's something about it that's just a bit different, and it's like I say, it's hard to pinpoint what that is.
I think the word character gets sort of attributed to a lot of lenses, and often it's used to describe a bad lens or a lens with lots of aberrations in it, lots of flaws. But this is good character. I mean, you could argue that all lens character is the result of aberrations. You know, a characterless lens would have no aberrations. It would be like perfectly clean and clinical. But yeah, I think what's probably important to point out is that this lens, compared to the rest of the Contax line, isn't actually as sharp. You know, the Zeiss in particular and the Contax line have got a reputation of being sharp, which they are. But the 28 I find is probably the least sharp of all of them, particularly wide open. But that doesn't mean that it's no good. Sharpness isn't everything when it comes to a lens. I think you're right, it is hard to put your finger on what it is specifically. I mean, I think the secret sauce and the reason perhaps why it's got its nickname Hollywood, it just has that cinematic look, and I think it's a combination of the wide angle of view, the close focus ability, and the fast aperture, so you get in a shallow depth of field, you know, even when you're right into camera, just the focus fall off looks so good.
Yeah, I think I think that's probably what drew me into the lens. I think we've chatted about it before, but just how close you can get and how the background disappears. For a lens like this, an aperture of 2 aperture, it's pretty crazy. And it just, yeah, especially when you get a really close shot, especially on someone's face or something like that, I think then it shines. It really shines then. Yeah, so have you got the 28mm on the C500 now?
I'm on a 2470 Mark II at 2.8. If I set it to 28mm, there's 28. Now if I put on the Contax, there we are. So that's 28. That's the Contax on there now, and it's got an amazing close focus. That's the close focus right there. And you see the focus fall off on it. It just does something to the image, doesn't it? This lens.
It does, it does. Yeah, I can't see what you're filming, so I'm just gonna agree and nod and just be like, yes.
Yeah.
Looks great.
Have you, how much stuff do you shoot with that 28? Like,
one of the jobs I do, which is filming like students, like acting students, we shoot like showreel scenes, and I pretty much use this lens 99% of the time. You start with a 2-shot, and the 2 people in a frame usually sat down, talking to each other. So I always start with some sort of 2-shot wide. So this is the lens I always go to first. So pretty much all the footage I've got with that job, you could say is a 28mm. Unless it's a very clear like profile shot, which is, you know, usually the 50mm. It's very, very, very likely it's a 28mm. But like I was saying before, it's just the most adaptable prime lens I've got, so I use it for a lot of stuff.
it flares really nicely as well. Do you find that?
Oh yeah, That's a good point. Yeah, the flares on this lens are, I think they'd throw a lot of people off, like, sometimes. Like, I think it always depends on the DP or the cameraman, but the flare is quite, yeah, it's quite different. Loving that flare, loving that shot you got, Alex, that I can see. I can definitely see right now.
It's nice. It's just nice glare, blue and green flare.
Is there anything you don't like about the lens?
That's a good question. I don't like how it hits a mirror on a full-frame DSLR. There's no way around that. You have to just set it away from infinity focus before entering or exiting live view. Other than that, I don't know. I mean, I've taken this lens apart, literally down to the optical blocks, and put it back together. It's a nice, simple lens. It's just really well made. What I don't like about it, I don't like the fact that it's just getting more and more expensive. They're quite hard to find. Like I said, I think yours is in better condition than mine. I mean, optically and mechanically, mine's fine. Just aesthetically, it's a bit more worn.
I think I've got some scratches on the front of on the front element.
Have you?
Yeah, the kit that wasn't from me, but when I bought it. But you really have to be looking for them to find them. That's one risky kind of side of getting Contax, or the 28 or the Contax lenses, is you never know what condition they're going to turn up in.
Yeah, that's something can be said for buying any lens on eBay, isn't it? But particularly the vintage lenses. You don't know. I have no idea how many people have used this lens before me, how many owners it's had.
You hope it's just been the one, and they've taken very good care of it, but you never know until it comes through the door.
The trick to buying vintage lenses is just waiting for the right one. You'll find probably quite a few bad copies of whatever it is you're searching for online, and you've just got to say, no, I'm not going to get that, I'm going to wait for the right one. I find auctions tend to go cheaper than buy it now. I think I've got mine, it's been a mix. Mine have been a mix of both buy it now and auctions, but I tend to find the auctions end at a lower price than the buy it nows. But yeah, you just got to hold on and wait for the right one.
I can imagine when you purchase a new one, when you first get it, I can imagine there's a lot of things you check.
Yeah, I mean, yeah, you obviously want visual inspection, make sure it's free of fungus and dust. Fungus and haze. Like every lens, particularly every vintage lens, will have dust in it. My 85's got quite a bit of dust in it. Dust is not something to be worried about at all. If a listing says, oh, it's got dust, like, doesn't factor into my buying. Every lens has dust in it.
I think the dust and probably scratches on the front, like little scratches. I think
I've seen a number of listings that say they've got light scratchings on the front and stuff, but I've avoided them. They're ones I wouldn't go for, just because I want that perfect set. If I'm going to spend all this time and money and effort into assembling this set of vintage lenses, I want them to be good copies.
I took a bit of a punt with my 28mm. It's a bit of a risk because I knew it had some scratches that did show it, and like I say, they are very hard to find. But I'm pretty sure they don't affect.
Have you ever seen them in your footage? Because I mean, usually scratches, you see them in like bokeh, or when you get strong light sources going in frames. Have you ever seen any?
I've used this lens quite a bit as well, and kind of I've filmed against all sorts of light. Never seen anything, not once. So
oh, that's good. Because you got me to blame if I was the one to send you the link to it.
Yeah, so I blame you for all this.
Do you mind saying how much you paid for yours?
I think it was under 500.
See, that is a steal.
I think
maybe that's why I sent the link to you.
Yeah, I think I got it for about 480.
I think mine was between 500 and 600 mine, and I know that was a good deal at the time. But I know now there must be like 800. Let's have a look. I can't see any f2s. They're all 2.8s. Oh, there's 850 quid. Ooh. And that's got a scratch on the rear element as well. So yeah, they're getting harder to find.
Yeah.
I think one of the other reasons why these, I don't know if it factors into the cult-like status of it, but certainly in terms of the availability of them, is these were almost only made in Germany. A lot of the Contax line were made in Japan as well. I mean, anyone who's researched Contax lenses will know there's AE lenses and MM lenses. All AE lenses end with a white F number, whereas the MMs end with green. The 28 F2 was, I think there were a few that were made in MM, but they are super rare. So it depends if you're trying to assemble a set of MMs, you've either got to get an AE 28 F2 or wait, I don't know how long and pay how much to try and get an MM copy of it.
Yeah, I think I've got the same as you, the AE.
Yeah,
copy.
they're basically the only ones you'll ever see in all likelihood.
Yeah.
So there's a lot less of them made.
I've seen people looking for like, you know, certain AEs and certain MMs, but then like some people have even gone down to like looking for certain codes.
Certain serials, yeah.
Certain serials.
It's just to try and help match
pretty crazy.
The years, so that the whole set was made roughly around the same time. In reality, it doesn't make a difference.
That's crazy, yeah. It's just like they're already quite hard to get a hold of. Never mind like a certain
yeah,
serial.
you're like yes, yeah. I thought I was giving myself a challenge by starting saying I'm only going to get an AE set and I'm going to get all the super speeds. I've imposed enough restrictions on myself just by doing that. I mean, some of the lenses, like this, were only made in AE. The 60mm macro, the 1-in-1, was only made in AE as well, for example. But the 21 was only made in MM. So I've got an MM in the set. You know, there's no way, two ways around it.
It all depends on what you're buying them for. Like, if you are buying them to use, I suppose it doesn't really make a massive difference.
No, it's just your preference. I mean, the only real difference is that Ninja Star aperture blade, isn't it?
Yeah.
Which you can see in
the
footage.
Classic Ninja Star.
I like it. Some people don't, which is fine. But I like it. It's like the signature look.
Wait, yeah, you talk about the look of the lens. I think that's part of it, isn't it?
Yeah. I mean, it's not on the MMs, but for me, that's you're right. It's part of the signature look of the Contax lenses.
For me, the thing that stands out about this lens is a lot of lens in something so bloody tiny, and it's so usable. Like, I know that people buy these lenses as like collectors or investments, and it's cool to collect them, but also it's just very, very usable. You get these results which kick ass.